Hi, and welcome to another episode of Other Record Labels. This is Scott. Thanks for listening. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I want to tell you something cool. This right now is our 5th episode, and I've been obsessing over the download numbers for the past month and a half that we've been doing this. And it's been really exciting to see every episode, and we do episodes every 2 weeks, to see every episode getting bigger than the previous episode. And so each time we release a new one, more people check it out that day than the previous episode. And that's really encouraging, and it's really exciting. And I really hope to see that continue. So if you've been enjoying the podcast, or if you think it's something that your colleagues or friends would enjoy, please tweet about it or share it with your community. It would really help. I've said before, it's such a small group of people who would find a conversation with record labels interesting, and so please help us find those people. When I first started searching the internet for labels and thinking about labels that I could contact, there were some labels that were pretty high up there in my mind, who I've known of and who I've bought records from, and I've had the opportunity to talk to some of those great labels. And today is one of the first labels to get back to me, and one of those labels where I thought, holy smokes, I never thought they would return my email. And the label today is Yep Rock Records. They're out in North Carolina. You've probably heard of them. They have artists like Josh Ruse, Nick Lowe, who I got to see live in Toronto recently, Grant Lee Phillips, Sloan. Anyway, huge label, really, really great label. And Billy Maupin is here to talk with us today. How's it going, Billy? Thanks so much for doing this.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
I got to ask you, when I was going through your artist list, I mean, I'm calling you from here in Canada. I'm in Ontario near Toronto. Is there like a Canadian connection with your label? Because, I mean, you have the Sadies, Born Ruffians, you've had Ron Sexsmith, Sloan. Like, what's going on? You're stealing our guys.
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of Canadian artists over the years. I think we've just been very fortunate to develop a reputation in the industry through a couple of artists that built up a level of trust, so that when some Canadian artists are talking about releasing in the U.S. and the rest of the world, that they think of us within that conversation. I think the Sadies are one of the longest standing Canadian artists that we work with. We've probably done 8 or 9 records with them over the last 10 plus years. I mean, well before I was with the company. So, they tour extensively and, have been great partners. So I think they could be one thing that I could point to that really kind of established our reputation in Canada. Another would be Sloan,
right?
Working on a new record for this year.
Yeah, I saw that.
Similar, we've had, I think this will be the 5th or 6th project we've done with them, and have really been fortunate in as they tour and tour with other artists and talk about in the press that they've been good advocates for us, and so I think those two I would point to right away.
Yeah, well, and they're both. I mean, especially Sloan. They're kind of national treasures here. So it's they're good names. They're great names. Tell me about. Could you tell me a little bit about Yep Rock and your title? And I know you're the general manager. A little bit about your responsibilities and how you kind of came to work at Yep Rock.
Yeah, so two questions that you asked there. A little bit about Yep Rock. It was started in We started. Two questions there. You're asking about how Yep Rock got started.
Yeah. You guys just had your 20th anniversary recently. Is that right?
That's right. Yep Rock was started in 1997 by Glenn Dicker and Tor Hansen, so in business for a little over 20 years. I actually came on board in 2010, but I had known the guys since back when they started the label. I was working for an artist management company actually right when they started out. So I've known them for the whole time. But I started with the company as general manager in 2010. Basically, my job is kind of like the coach of the team, if you will. I do a lot of organizing, a lot of planning, and a lot on the sales and marketing side, sort of making sure we're on budget and we're, kind of hitting the goals that we want to make. Sort of some of the boring business side of things, but then I also get to contribute a lot on the creative side. So things like Yep Rock's 20th anniversary, I help kind of plan all of that, which included, over 20 artists performing over a couple of days and people coming from all over the world to kind of help us celebrate. So I like to say I get to do a little bit of or use both sides of my brain, more creative, but also the more business minded. So it's really stimulating in that way.
Oh, that's great. You guys are, sorry, I didn't ask you at the beginning. You guys are out of North Carolina, is that right?
That's right. We're based in Hillsborough, North Carolina, which is just really close to Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Durham, kind of the three big cities in the area called the Triangle in North Carolina. We're about an hour flight from New York, about an hour flight from Nashville, and the company really started kind of in a more regional way, exposing the music of the area that the label was started in. So a lot of the kind of alt country or honky tonk music that was going on in North Carolina in the late 90s, some of the great pop stuff like the Mayflies USA. Those were the first things that, the label kind of put out, and then we branched out nationally and then internationally in the years that followed. Well,
it's funny you say that because I think I read somewhere you guys were involved with the Sam Phillips biography. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Yes. So the Sam Phillips one was an interesting one. There's an author named Peter Guralnick. He's written a couple books on Elvis and a few other people, and he started talking about this book that he was doing about Sam Phillips and the Sun record story, and he really wanted to curate a soundtrack of that went along with the book, and some of the tracks, not necessarily the obvious ones that have been released before. I mean, you're talking about Elvis and Johnny Cash and Roy Orbison and the list goes on. So that was a really fun project to kind of get into and work with him to kind of put together this package that both supported the book, but would also musically kind of be a fresh look at the legacy that Sam Phillips had, and it's actually one of the things that I kind of tell to people that don't know a lot about the music business or stuff. You kind of get to the lowest common denominator. I sort of explain, well, we packaged and released an Elvis Presley series of songs, and everybody knows Elvis. So.
Yeah, totally. How does that? I mean, it's really cool too because when you really boil all of the music from America down, it really a lot of it goes back to that era. And I actually just started reading that book. I can't believe how good it is. I can't put it down. I thought it would be a lot more historical, but it's a great story.
Yeah. Peter's a really great writer. And, I think sometimes historical books like that can be very dry and very, hard to kind of dig into, but I think his writing style and kind of the way he approaches it, it puts a little bit of life into it, a little bit of humor, a little bit of elements that make it a really engaging read, and hopefully that was some of the feedback we got for the compilation that we did with it as well, is that people were like, well, look, I've got all of these songs. Why would I buy it again? But it was curated in such a way. And if you read the book, it sort of went hand in hand. So again, that was a really a fun project to be a part of.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of times where you're hearing him describe a song or a technique in recording, and like I just think I got to open up Apple Music and listen to that. I want to hear that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
because it's described so well. Was that complicated from a licensing perspective to put that together? Like where did all those rights come from?
That's a good question. I could probably do a whole show.
Oh, really?
that one release. The short answer is that a number of the masters were controlled by what is Sun Records today.
Okay.
Their catalog is controlled by a company, so that was relatively straightforward. A few of the other tracks, were involved in estates and a couple of the major labels and things like that. It wasn't necessarily hard. It's just a lot of due diligence and
right.
things like that. Because most of the people of that era at this point, they're interested in exploiting their catalog.
Yeah.
So it's not a question of will they let you do it. It's more like how much and when and for how long and all
right.
those types of questions. So it was definitely it was one of the more involved ones that we've done from a licensing standpoint for sure.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I was kind of curious about that. I'm stoked to. I was checking it out, but that kind of, now that you say it makes a good companion with reading the book. That's something I want to try to do. Let's.
I'll throw another one in there that I just read not too long ago. Not one that we released, but I sure had fun kind of reading it and listening to the music. Was the Tom Petty biography? I read that when it originally came out, and kind of would read a little bit, stop, listen to the song that he was talking about, and
cool.
Go back and I did that recently after he passed away,
right.
and it's pretty amazing. You almost have to read the book twice, once to read it and then once to sort of sit and listen to the music that's being, discussed.
That's cool. Is that an authorized biography or was that like autobiography?
I think it's his autobiography.
Oh, okay. Okay,
yes.
Cool. Yeah, I would love to check that out. And that's what I like about this Sam Phillips one, is that it sounds like it comes out of a lot of conversations with Sam himself. Is that, do you know if that's true? I mean, that
it is true. Yeah. So the background for that, I'd have to pull up my notes. I believe that this process actually started years ago, that
right.
Peter did a number of interviews with him at different times, that he was able to draw direct knowledge of certain specific items. And I saw him speak one time. It was Peter, that is, and
mm-hmm.
he'd gone on about some detail about the way the microphone was set up or this or that. And, someone stood up and asked the question during the Q&A and said, "Well, how do you know that's what was happening?" And Peter's response was, "Sam told me." So it's a very direct, like, "Hey, I've got the proof," kind of thing. So
I love that.
I would definitely count this as the authoritative representation.
Totally. I want to talk a lot about Yep Rock, and I really want to get your perspective on a lot of things, and a lot of this. I mean, the whole idea of this podcast is to ask these questions to you and to other people that I often ask myself, and with about my own label, and it's running a label is I don't have any friends that also run a label, so I don't really have anyone to kind of shoot ideas off of. But I've got so many questions. I really want to dive into them. One thing I read, your founder, Glenn Dicker, he said in an article I read, he said, Yep Rock never adheres to any particular scene or market niche, which I thought was really interesting, because I've always thought that carving out a micro niche is a good thing for a label. What do you think?
I mean, there's certainly labels that have done that over the years. Mm-hmm. I think that for Yep Rock specifically, we're looking for a couple of things. One is, typically we just want to work with artists who have something to say, right. That have a creative fire, that have something going on creatively. And second to that, we want to feel like it moves us in some way, whether it's, rock or folk or, songwriter. I think we all, work better and harder and, are more excited when we actually kind of connect with the music. And then the third thing that we try to hold up as kind of an ideal is, do we think we can add value to what the artist is doing? And there have been times, and Glenn specifically has said this, there are artists that we could release records from, but we don't feel like there's more we can do there. We can't really add value to what they're doing. So I think we're at our best when that kind of partnership with an artist kind of starts at, they put a little bit of trust in us. We can bring something to the table maybe that they don't have at the moment or they need help with, and we really go from there. So, I think we definitely have crossed genres, and we've done a lot of different styles and different types of artists. But in the end, I think it all kind of makes sense as Yep Rock,
right?
And kind of the vision of the founders. I mean, they're both, music lovers.
Right.
They're very, very deep into records and artists and all that kind of thing. So I think it's a good philosophy for us as a label, and has definitely given us a lot of opportunities that maybe we wouldn't have been able to explore if we were just, a heavy metal label or a rap label or whatever.
Right. And I think when you kind of, even if you are not a really narrow niche, you do have a pocket. I think looking at your artists, there are a few that are maybe on the further end of the spectrum, but really a lot of it is that Americana and alt country singer-songwriter vibe.
Yeah.
Did you, going back 10 years, I want to ask you something I wouldn't get a chance to ask other labels, but I know a lot of your artists, and funny enough, a lot of your artists I came to through Paste magazine back in the kind of, the early 2000s, like that golden era of Paste magazine, and where there was all this new singer-songwriter stuff, Josh Ritter and Kathleen Edwards and Ryan Adams, all this stuff was happening. I noticed that there was this kind of bump in folk music, in the mid to late 2000s. Is that something that you guys benefited from, like having, a lot of these folk artists being now on pop and rock radio?
Yeah, I think specifically, genres like bluegrass and folk and country to a lesser extent kind of come in and out of favor with the public in terms of what gets written about, what gets played on the radio. And the frame you're talking about certainly was a time where it was like a resurgence of some of those styles of music, right. And we definitely benefited from that. But I think we try to at least work with artists over the long haul, where we imagine, 20 or 30 years where we're going to see that trend go up and down a couple of times,
right.
Let's say.
That's fair. Yeah.
If you're kind of more plugged into that, hey, it's a great artist, it's a great record, it's a great songwriter, those types of things, you'll kind of outlast those trends that maybe in hindsight you can see those spikes, but definitely the time and the place you're talking about was a very, very fertile for sort of new music, and Pace did a great job of and still do
totally.
a good job of kind of bringing some of that to the forefront.
You guys really you were probably rewarded during that time because it was something you had always done, but is it tempting to hop on to trends, or how do you avoid that?
That's a good question. How do we avoid that? I don't know that we sort of avoid it as much as we just kind of do our thing. We do the Yep Rock thing,
yeah.
And we let the rest of it kind of sort itself out. I don't know that we ever actively go out looking for anything like that. But certainly if we're included in it, we make the most of it, and we make the most of it on behalf of our artist. But I think we're kind of used to just kind of plowing our own field, so to speak, and just kind of doing what we do and kind of keeping our head down and being kind of workmanlike. And a lot of our artists, that's the way they are as well, and less concerned about the moment to moment changes in the marketplace.
Oh, that's great. One of the questions I was really curious about, and this is something I struggle with a lot, as we're talking about the brand of Yep Rock, how much effort should a label put into building and promoting the brand of the label versus building and promoting the brands of their artists?
That's a good question as well. I think it depends on what you want to achieve as the label. Speaking only from Yep Rock's perspective, we've always kind of imagined that we're supporting what the artist is doing. Right. So we start at promoting them and knowing that them being successful will make Yep Rock successful. Good point. We probably spent a lot less time kind of marketing the label as a whole. But over time, what's happened is we definitely, because you mentioned a lot of artists that kind of touch a lot of the same notes, so to speak, have been able to build up an audience that are Yep Rock fans, and sort of trust us as curators to bring them new music. And one way we've seen that manifest itself is the Completist program that we have, which is people that buy every record that we release. And that wasn't a cognizant idea that we were like, hey, we're going to build up the brand enough that we'll be able to do this. But it was more a byproduct coming out of our 15th anniversary, where people trusted us enough that we could kind of make that, guarantee, like, you're going to be happy with our year's worth of releases. So I think, I could see the standpoint, though, from a label that maybe they want to put the label first, and that's what people are kind of buying into, and the artists are secondary. But for Yep Rock, definitely, we put the artist out there first and spend most of our time and energy around the marketing of them. I think Glenn famously said that, if you imagined a big truck kind of driving with the artist in the front, we would be in the camper in the back being pulled along. So we've definitely used that image, a couple of times to kind of explain what we do.
Well, that's cool, because I would kind of visualize it the other way around, and I think that's probably good practice. I mean, it's a good thought, and it can be just as rewarding as the other way around. I mean, to say, like what you said, is that when the artists are successful and multiple artists are successful, then that turns around to you, and that's something that you guys can benefit from. Yeah, that's a good thought. I was thinking about, I want to talk a little bit about artists and how you kind of come across artists. One of the things I have to remind myself when I'm talking to new artists or new potential signings is I often forget that the term record label kind of used to hold negative connotations. It's changing a little bit now with indie labels, but anyone familiar of the record labels you'd see in movies or on TV, or you would hear about, from the 80s and 70s and 80s and 90s taking advantage of artists. How do you start a dialogue with an artist when there is that kind of trust deficit?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in popular medium, the record label was always portrayed as the bad guy. That's for sure. And there's probably some very good reasons for that, that you could go back and point to in history. I think it's like anything else. You want to start the relationship in a way that's mutually beneficial, and I think you want to be transparent about what you can do and what you can't do. I think everybody needs to know kind of up front what the parameters of your relationship is. Both financial, but also, timing and creative elements that go into it. I think if you can do that, you'll build up trust over time with artists and managers and lawyers and people who know that, you're kind of above board and you're willing to, work for the common good, so to speak. We are a business, we're not a nonprofit. So we definitely have to keep those things in mind. But most artists are businesses too,
Right.
and are approaching it from a, how do we make a living at this? How do I get fulfilled creatively, but also financially? So I think that those first stages are important, just in the kind of sketching all of that out and being focusing on the relationship first, and then being transparent about all the particulars that go into that relationship.
Well, I like what you said at the very beginning too. You said that there's been times where you don't feel like you guys have anything to offer necessarily the artist, and that's why sometimes you maybe won't work with someone, is that you can't bring anything new to the table. I thought that's a really kind of humble approach.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, you got to take that into consideration, because as a small company, we only have a finite amount of time and resources, and so we've got to look at the return that goes into sometimes these relationships, because again, we're talking hopefully in most cases years that we're going to be working with some
Totally.
people. There are a few artists that we've been working with close to 20 years, so
Right.
I think you can see that approach is kind of paid off.
Well, and it's good that you do that, because on one hand, there's the negative connotation of record labels and pop culture, but on the other hand, on the opposite side of the coin, there's some bands who have really crazy expectations of record labels. They really expect that once they get a deal that they can quit their coffee shop jobs and all of a sudden be millionaires and be touring with whoever they want. So it's kind of
that's very true. Yeah.
This kind of leads into something that I'm striving for all the time, that business relationships in general are can kind of lead to conflict. It's just naturally, even with my best friends who are on my label, I still have it's very awkward to talk about money. How do you avoid conflict with artists?
How do we avoid conflict? I don't know that we avoid conflict. I think we probably approach it when it comes up, and it will come up,
right?
With an open mind and a spirit of cooperation, and sort of learning to compromise, and making sure that everybody is coming at it from a place of, well, just because this happens doesn't mean that you win and I lose, kind of thing. I mean, it sounds maybe cliched, but the sort of win-win scenario.
Right.
So I think that's important in all of this. Is things are going to come up. Things are going to be of a nature that maybe you didn't expect, or maybe the artist didn't expect. But you can handle your business in a way that kind of gets you through that without having to avoid it. I know. And I'm sure you didn't intend it that way, but the word avoid kind of, to me, puts a connotation of like, you're not going to deal with something.
Right. That's a good point. That's fair. Yeah.
And so I always say, don't, it's not avoiding so much as the way you approach resolving whatever the issue is.
That's a better word. Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a great point. Let's talk about the artists themselves. When you're looking for a new artist, or an artist is coming to you, thinking about the different aspects of attributes of an artist, what would you say is important? I mean, is it chemistry with you and the label? Is it songwriting? Is it how big their existing fan base is, or is it some unknown X factor?
I think all of those go into every discussion that we have. I mean, it always starts with the music. If we're not feeling the music, it doesn't matter how big a potential audience is, and that can be that can be tough. So for us, it really starts with the music. Some of the other things that we're interested to know is, just like you said, how big is your existing audience? Who are they? How do you talk to them? How do you engage with them? Are they physical buyers? Are they digital buyers? Those types of things. We're also usually interested in what other team members might be a part of whatever situation's being propose. These can be agents or managers or friends, those types of things. Who else is going to be kind of in the trenches, making it happen? That definitely can play a role.
Well, that's cool.
We've had artists before that we totally believe in, and I'm sure we'll do this again, but maybe don't have a manager or an agent or a publisher or whatever, and it's a missing component, because there's just so much to do all the time that it can be really beneficial to have other people who have the best interest of the artist in mind. So that's something that we look for. I would say, relationship with us, or if they vibe with us, those kind of things, that can be important. It's not a deal breaker.
Sure.
But I know from, I manage 10 people, and it's certainly easier to motivate them to go a little extra when they really like the artist and they really connect with them and they're passionate about what they do. A few cases maybe where we've worked with artists who are, maybe don't gel with us or those types of things. It's harder to get people excited about it, and I'll say a lot of times, this may not hold true in every case. I'm sure somebody that works with me will send me an example, but a lot of times if we don't gel with them, they probably don't gel with radio either, or press or other people, It's something about them, or the way they go about things is different, and that's okay, But we definitely take that into consideration. But I think music, first and foremost, and kind of what we think the audience is and where we think we can grow it to.
That's cool. Where do you find these bands? I mean, is it different for every band, or how does it happen?
Yeah, it's different for every artist, kind of going back to your historical things. I think everybody that doesn't deal in the music business thinks that you're out at smoky clubs at 3 o'clock in the morning, listening to a band you've never heard and, being blown away. And I think that's maybe in this day and age more of a myth than anything else. When I started in the business, there were still A&R people and had expense budgets and were flying all over the people to see musicians. And that's over the last 20 years, and kind of coincides with the growth of Yep Rock, is that's kind of gone by the wayside a lot. I think in some of the hip hop and electronic and some of those, there's still some of that. For us, it starts a lot with recommendations from trusted sources.
Right.
We might get a call from a radio station who gives you, a new record, or gives you, a tip on an artist. A lawyer who we've worked with on a past deal might say, hey, you should check this out. I think they would be a good fit. Or, we've even had musicians who we work with come to us and say, hey, I played on this session with so-and-so, you should really check them out, those types of things. So it's a lot more recommendations and things coming to us. Again, I think being in business for 20 years, we've kind of earned the spot where a lot more things get brought to us than we can possibly do, which is a great position to be in. But it certainly makes it easier when it's that manager or agent or somebody you've worked with that you trust their instincts bringing it to you, because you might spend a little more time with it or pay a little closer attention, because well, look, they kind of know what's going on in the marketplace.
It reminds me of the Sam Phillips book again. I was just thinking about how crazy it must have been for Sam. He just brings in a janitor or a taxi driver he was talking to record a record. Those days are gone.
Yeah. No, it's definitely different in that way.
Do you accept demos? Do you get demos?
We do. They're not as many as we did before.
Yeah.
I can't think of one single case where an unsolicited item came in that we ended up working with.
Yeah, I was curious. I was going to ask.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Sure. I'm just saying I think the likelihood is, the output of music is so radically different than it used to be. I use the story. When I started in the business, I could tell you every release that was coming out on the Tuesday release day, the
Right.
label it was on, the people that worked at the label, that kind of thing. It was kind of a manageable number, right? There was a barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Now, with the way digital recording's gone and people can record in their home or their car or wherever they're doing it on their mobile phone and edit it and upload it, that there's really not that barrier to entry. So it's difficult at times to wade through all of that. I mean, you're talking thousands and thousands of releases coming out
Oh, totally.
in a year. So when you magnify that by all the things that don't come out that are kind of vying for your time, I think it's just difficult to, imagine a scenario where you're wading through all of that plus doing what everything else we have to do.
Have you? No, that's totally fair. And I mean, that's a great lesson for younger artists who are thinking, I'm gonna package, and I've done this myself, 10 or 15 years ago. I'm gonna package up, 100 CDs in manila envelopes and, send them to labels across the country. It's a good lesson.
Yeah.
As we're talking about, you're talking a little bit about change. One of the challenges that it's not really a challenge, it's kind of exciting in a way, but it's also a little bit dizzying is that the music industry is always changing, and it means that formats are changing and distribution channels are changing and marketing tactics are changing. Is that something like, do you find that you have to keep up with that? And how do you thrive when the industry is always evolving and shifting?
Well, that's one you just kind of have to dig in and try to keep up as best you can. I don't think just music. I think the world is just moving at a furious pace.
Yeah, that's true.
And you've got to learn to adapt and be open to that change that's present, because that's the history of humankind, right? Adapting to change. And so we're no different. I think we try to take the approach of let's test and, see what the results are pretty quickly and then make judgments after that point. We streaming to downloads to, anything that kind of comes along. I think you have to see where it goes before you pass judgment on it, because again, it's just happening at such a furious pace. And, we're interested in, promoting our artists, whatever medium that may be, radio or press or, people listening. And I think all of the changes have been beneficial in one crucial way, which is it's just gotten more people listening to music, which is exciting. We sat down with Amazon and just talked through some of the stats and things that they had with their service that's tied to their, mobile voice activated devices, the Echoes, and it's just really thrilling from the standpoint that, look, more people are listening to music actively on a daily basis than they were a year ago or 2 years ago or 10 years ago, for sure.
That's great.
And so I think even though it may represent some operational challenges or organizational challenges, I think it's important for us to say, hey, as a business, how do we take advantage of this? How do we make the most of it while, kind of respecting the integrity and the intent of the artist in its original fashion.
You've been general manager for 10 years, so you would have been around for the start of the vinyl resurgence, so to speak. Can you take me back to when that first started moving the needle for you?
Yeah, so Yeprock's interesting in that way, in that we never stopped making vinyl.
Right. Okay, cool.
Through, from the beginning. I think that there were a few releases we didn't do vinyl for, but as a rule, we probably made more vinyl during that, what would be considered the fallow period of vinyl. And whether it was...
Oh, is that just because of your genre?
Genre, and I think we've always kind of been ear to the ground, sort of independent music people. I mean, independent stores were selling vinyl,
right?
During that time. Maybe it didn't make sense for the folkiest artist or the bluegrass artist, and 2006, let's say, but it certainly made sense for Low Straitjackets or, even some of the Nick Lowe reissues. So we never really stopped. I think that it really picked up for us around 2012, 2013.
Okay.
Where it became not if we were making it, but we were making it for every release because the marketplace is there. And it's just accelerated over the past couple of years. I think there's two factors that kind of have gone into that. One is that with the rise of digital music, you really lost some of the tactile kind of parts that we knew when we were younger, i.e., you pick up the record as you're listening to it, you read the liner notes and that kind of thing. And so I think as digital came about, there was a whole new generation of people listening to music digitally only, and we're looking at it in a kind of a faceless, what is this kind of way, and looking for something more. So I think that really spurred it. The other thing that I think really kind of got it going was the rise of Record Store Day and efforts of people in the U.S. primarily, but now starting in other territories to kind of cultivate this idea of, and it's always been there, the collectability of it and the importance of that physical item and sort of the importance of the store. And so they're going to be celebrating their 10th anniversary this year, but I think they've really done a lot to kind of expand that market. So
that's a good point.
Yep Rock hasn't, like I said, hasn't ever really stopped.
That's really cool.
But we've sold more for sure over the last couple of years.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right about the digital aspect, and it all happened, in my opinion, it all happened on a subconscious level where it's just, digital was so convenient and so great, and it was this huge world, but all of a sudden you just felt like you were lacking something, and I think they work really well together. That's what I like about vinyl and with digital, is that I don't think it's either or. I think it's a great partnership to when you're on the train or you're on a plane. Digital makes a lot of sense, but in your living room, in that intimate space, I think there's such a great environment for vinyl.
Definitely.
I love it. What is have over the past 10 years, has your opinion of streaming changed, or I should say over the past, 2 or 3 years?
I think it continues to evolve.
Yeah. Your opinion does?
I think that it's definitely valuable. And I think it certainly has shown through the efforts of Spotify and Apple, and to a lesser extent YouTube and Spotify, kind of what the public actually is interested in. I think the sort of on-demand, always available, eat all you can kind of model that Netflix and others have put up have certainly, benefited the active listening of people. Like I said,
right.
People like my wife who weren't going into to buy things in stores is listening to more music, through Pandora or Amazon or Spotify or what have you.
Right.
So I think that's been positive. I think for me, what I kind of go back and forth on, and this just could be of when I came of age, it's still trying to put your finger on like how you draw the line between the person in Brazil that streamed your song, 100 times to the next step, going to a show or buying a physical, T-shirt or record. And so that's been an interesting challenge. And I think it'll continue to be the one that the industry kind of grapples with is, okay, how do you market to these people now? How do you make more out of this?
Yeah.
Than just listening in kind of a passerby kind of way. So there's tools and things that are being built that I think will help that, but it kind of refines my thinking all the time is how to plug into that, because as a marketer, you want to think about how to get to the people directly.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That just kind of got me thinking, like, there's probably people out there, anywhere in the world who will listen to a playlist every night when they go to sleep, and will hear a song every night of the year, but won't know who that artist is. And it's interesting. And in a way, that artist is getting paid every night, but it also has a con to it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And I think it's just, how do you draw that line? Mm-hmm. How do you get them out of the playlist and into other elements that maybe have a higher return, let's say, or more engagement than just, hey, I just listened to 100 songs that are, all themed around whatever, working out or whatever top playlist there are.
Yeah, no, that's good. I won't take much more of your time, but when you're running the label, what's something you really enjoy doing? What's something that you're really good at? I know that as general manager, you probably, make coffee as well and sweep up every now and then, but
fix leaks. Yeah. Do a little bit of all of it at a time. What do I really enjoy? I love seeing things come into being. I love sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and kind of conceptualizing something that doesn't exist, whether it's a campaign or a particular way to go about something, or even just a marketing idea, let's say, and working at that over a period of time with the artist to develop that into actually coming to life. I enjoy both the unknowns of it, sort of, where is this going to go? And I also enjoy the challenge of that, because I think it sort of, like I said at the beginning, kind of taps into both sides of my brain, the sort of, very creative side and the more practical, pragmatic, business-minded side.
Yeah. Yeah. You said, here's another thing. You said before, and something I read, that the hardest thing you have to do running a record label is to say no. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. An artist comes to you and says, we can go tour Russia, Croatia, Scandinavia, and, Germany 3 months from now. It's going to cost us $18,000, let's say. The artist really wants to do it, and there's compelling reasons, and it could be opening a new market, and all the positive things that come with that. Looking at the financial thing, maybe it doesn't make sense, and having to say, hey, I don't think that this is what we want to do at this moment. So it could be the big things like that. Down to the small ones. Do we want to release, another single? Do we want to go to radio? Those types of things where people always want to believe, that something's going to happen or this is going to be the thing. But sometimes you have to, put your kind of business cap on and say, okay, what's the likelihood? What's the reality here?
Right.
And that happens with releases as well. There's a couple of times where there's artists we love. I mean, we just absolutely love and would love to do a record, but financially it just doesn't make sense.
Right.
Again, for a business, and so having to tell an artist that maybe you idolized or have respect for musically, and that's hard. But as a business, sometimes you got to do that. And, we like to say, or we throw around sometimes it's great to just be a fan, and not have to deal with some of that. So it can be hard, but it's an important skill, not just in music, but in, other aspects of business.
Yeah. Well, and I was really curious about, your thoughts on saying no, because really it is, every artist is an entrepreneur. And so they have their own ideas and their own things that they wake up in the middle of the night excited about. But,
right. Or their own agendas.
Yeah.
They might have a reason they want to tour Russia and Croatia and wherever else.
Yeah.
That doesn't fit what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the future of Yep Rock, the future of vinyl, the future of streaming, the future of the whole industry. What are you hopeful for? What are you excited about? Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still excited about coming to work every day and seeing what is around the corner, which I think can apply to any of those. We're fortunate we work with some really talented people that I think still have their best work ahead of them. Sure. And so I'm excited to see what that holds. We just had a conversation with an artist today who's about to start recording his new record. And, I got really excited thinking about how that was going to turn out. So musically, that's something that I look for.
That's great.
Vinyl, I think you'll see a leveling off here before too long.
Right.
I know everybody talks about it as a bubble, but again, the practical, pragmatic side of me knows that all those people that are in their 20s buying vinyl now as collectible pieces are going to be getting married and getting apartments and having kids. And, once you move around a few thousand records a couple of times, you start looking at other start looking at other options just because physically it becomes a problem. And that comes from somebody who, has been a lifelong collector and has had to move lots of things. I can see over the horizon for them. So, but my hope is the same, is that it continues to be a viable format, because it is, from a quality standpoint, it's a very engaged listening. You have to get up and flip the record over. Totally. You have to open the record and pull it out. It's almost like the slow food movement. It's sort of the slow music. How can you savor this? Yeah. So I'm hopeful that continues to be, something that really people engage with. As far as streaming and digital and all of these things, I mean, streaming to me kind of represents the endpoint, so to speak, right? I mean, there's not another format that's out there beyond it. There may be variations on it, but it's not like, unless they're talking about implanting something in our head or something, you can't get any more instant or, unlimited sort of access than we have now. So I think my hope for that is just, further, penetration into, it's a part of the marketplace. It's a part of people's lives. It's, they listen to more music and find new and interesting ways to use it. I just think it'll be interesting, just given the pace that the technology's changed over the last couple of years, to see where we are in another couple and consolidation that may, happen in the marketplace. I mean, I don't think it's any secret that there's a couple of companies out there that, likely will either be bought or sold or merged or what have you in a few years. So I think that can be good and bad. So I'm interested to see how that all turns out. So yeah, I mean, those are all the things I'm looking forward to.
Well, that's cool. Well, listen, Billy, thanks so much for doing this. Thank you for being so transparent about your thoughts on the business and music and Yep Rock. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to come on and talk today.
You can follow Yep Rock on Twitter at Yep Rock, and that's spelled YEPROC. And their website is yeprock.com. Thanks so much to Billy for doing this, and thank you everyone for listening. Please check out Yep Rock. They've actually, by the time that this has gone out, they've had some incredible releases this year. They're very busy, so make sure you check them out. You can follow us on Twitter at Other Songs, and please share the podcast with people that you think might enjoy it, and do subscribe. Thanks for listening.